Can Christians really develop and affect a culture through the written word, through writing? We're going to talk about that and more today with Sherrie Clark, coming up on Mission and Likeness. Hey everyone, welcome to Mission and Likeness. My name is Scott. We have a great episode for you today. Really excited to talk to Sherrie Clark. She is from Storehouse Media Group down in Jacksonville, Florida. And we're going to be talking to her coming up on the show. Before we do that, I want to talk about writing. Writing is something that I love. I love a good story. And I love how, writing is so influential, in our culture. People tend to think that, books are dying, but and the physical book might be, not as popular as it once was, but that doesn't mean that storytelling, that doesn't mean that writing isn't still crucial in shaping culture, because blog posts and websites and articles, all those kinds of things contribute to that culture. It's just that, books have shifted from books and magazines into blogs and, visual storytelling as well. But I was thinking, what is the best way to shape a culture? We talk here on Mission and Likeness a lot about, what our mission is and how we do that in the likeness of Christ. And we can talk about it. That's one way. And we can also live it out. Each and every day, if you're living out the gospel, if you're living out the truths of who God is and what he has done for you, that's going to push you into our response. And our response is to live that out each and every day. And by doing that, we begin to develop culture. If we are all doing that, if everyone in your church and in the church down the street, and if believers are coming together, submitting themselves to God, and then living out what he has called us to do, we're going to develop a culture. A culture is things that people do collectively that is normalized. And so if it is normal in our community for people to be repenting of sin and discipling and living out the truths of the gospel, and that is going to be culture. So what does writing have to do with that? Well, writing is a great way to express what we know to be true, what we believe. It's a great way to defend what we believe, to articulate and to work out, to hash out some deep ideas. You can do that really well through writing. I feel like a lot of Christians, and I'm guilty of this in some respects as well, but I feel like a lot of Christians, we just try to fit in to what secular culture is doing and what it's leading us in. And we try to fit in, and then we try to sprinkle a little bit of the gospel in there every once in a while. And really what it comes down to is, as long as we can do our Christian thing, without compromising too many of our values, without compromising too many of our beliefs or convictions, we're okay. And we just kind of coast through life. And if an opportunity comes to us, then we'll share the gospel, or we'll take that opportunity as it comes to us. But that's not how you really affect culture. In order to affect culture, you need to be on the offensive, not defensive. So how do we do that? And like I said, we do that through living out the gospel. But from living out the gospel, we can use writing, we can use written word to begin developing other methods of sharing our beliefs. The Bible tells us that we are set apart. We have been sanctified. We have been set apart. We are holy. We are unique in that we have our faith in Christ. And so if how we're living our lives, I said this in a recent episode, I said if our lives are not distinguishable as believers from a non-believer, that's a big problem. So if we are these unique, set-apart humans, beings, then what we are doing, not just how we're living, should be separated, but what we do and how we articulate and how we create art should also be set apart. It should be unique. It should be something that you're watching it or you're reading it and you're saying, this is different from what other people see things as. So this means that we should be taking our skills and really considering, how do we shape culture? And I would say, if you're someone who enjoys writing, write more. Write about how the gospel is changing your life. Write about what God is teaching you. Write about your struggles. Write about things that other believers or even non-believers should know, should understand. You can be extremely artistic in your writing and glorify God. You can write about things you struggle with. You can write about things that you have been victorious over in life. That you've defeated the sin, or the Spirit has defeated that sin, and how God is working. The Bible is the story of God, and we see time and time again how God works and weaves and just orchestrates so many different amazing stories all throughout the scripture. And as we, who are people that are set apart, have the Spirit in us, we should be on the front lines creating media that is, again, reinforcing. It's not that we can rewrite the Bible, but God is working through us to create so many different opportunities to reach people with the gospel. So how we live out the gospel is a huge conversation that I'm hoping over the course of this series that we'll be able to talk about, and we'll be able to explain and work out, as we can. But I think books, blogs, and other form of media have been a huge opportunity for Christians lately, with the explosion of personal blogs and TikToks and being able to self-publish now. And we're going to be talking, like I said, with Sherrie Clark, who works at Storehouse Media Group. They are working with authors to help them get published, to help them learn the skills and trades of writing and marketing their books and getting out there. That these are the avenues that we really need to be pursuing, or writers need to be pursuing maybe more aggressively. But I think where we can get a little bogged down is we immediately become scared that we don't have the skills or we don't have the abilities. But I think the awesome thing about just how the Spirit works is, if you're just being genuine about how God has worked in your life, or whatever story you're really looking to communicate, God is able to work through so many different things that we on our own personal level might say, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. But the Spirit already knows how it is going to take what you have done and what you've produced and use it to draw people to God. Now, I will say that Christian media has definitely had its ups and downs. I mean, there is some just phenomenal Christian media out there that is just beautifully produced, beautifully written, beautifully acted out. There is great Christian artists out there. There's great composers and musicians and all of that. There are so many, and I believe that there's so many more that just haven't come to that yet. But there's also been a fair share of, your classic corny Christian, where it's almost like taboo if there's anything that is not, the white picket fence kind of thing. And Christian media has also taken, addiction, substance abuse, and marital relationships, all that kind of stuff, to another level where they make it so over the top that it's kind of unrealistic. And so I think we need to work on that as a whole. But really, I do believe that like I said, there is some great Christian media that is coming up. And I believe that not too long from now, we'll be directly competing, with the mainstream. But one of the things that we're passionate about is at least getting some things started. I don't claim to, be able to produce, Hollywood level stuff, but that's why we have started a Creative Partners program. If you're not familiar with our Creative Partners program, go to the website, lovelocalpa.com/partners and check out and sign up to be a creative partner. If you're someone who wants to produce music or produce short films or any kind of video content, we would love to partner with you. We'd love to talk to you about that. But specifically in writing, writing is a skill that, it is not my strong point. I like writing. But it's not something that I am overly skilled in, I would say. But it's so powerful. I can think back to a number of books that have just immediately captured my attention. And, a lot of people will say that, Americans specifically don't have a long attention span. And there is truth to that, but I think it's also interesting that people will watch a 3.5-hour conversation between Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, but in the same breath say that people don't have attention spans. People will watch a 3-hour, Super Bowl, but they don't have attention spans. The caveat to that is, if you can tell a good story, if you can get people hooked quickly on what you're presenting, you can keep their attention longer. Once you've developed the interest, and if you can keep their interest, you can have them watch a full-length thing. The new Batman movie, I think that's out, is 3.5 hours long or something like that. It's a super long film, but people will watch it. The problem is we're so inundated with so much content, and the vast majority of the content we watch has no substance. It is meaningless, essentially. It may be slightly entertaining, but everyone's a creator now. Anyone that has a phone can create video, can create podcasts, can create content. But just because people can create content doesn't mean that it's good content. I want to focus on creating good quality content, stuff that's going to keep people's attention, stuff that people are actually interested in. That's part of my hope here at Love Local, and that's part of Sherrie's hope. And we're going to be talking to her, like I said, in just a couple of minutes. But so that is where the distinction is. If you can get someone's attention, we scroll through social media and you have just a fraction of a second to really capture someone's attention. But once you've developed a relationship with people, that's why talk radio has continuously been a huge platform, a huge media platform. That's why, writers, if you're a good writer, you can grow an audience and they will read 3,000-4,000 word blog posts because they know they appreciate the skill of writing, and they understand that writing is a powerful way to communicate, and it will continue to be a powerful way to communicate, whether that's in a physical book or whether that's on a blog. It's still writing, and there's still an art to writing that needs to be developed and needs to be, worked on over the course of time. So if you're someone that is interested in learning how to write, learning how to develop those skills, definitely stick around. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumbler. Just search for Mission and Likeness. we'd love for you to join us on those platforms as well. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. All right, so if you didn't get a chance to watch or listen to the last episode, I talked about Disney's film that just came out, Turning Red, and how it is, in my opinion, it is an attack on the family structure, on, you know, how we respect people and why we do the things that we do. So I would encourage you to go give it a watch. And that's going to tie into, you know, my conversation coming up with Sherrie Clark. Can we make good, engaging content, specifically in written word, that glorifies God, but isn't, you know, full of sex and profanity? Talk to her next.
Knowing the principles and values of the businesses and organizations that you support is growing more and more important each and every day. That's why here at Love Local, we are building a community of people that support businesses like yours and share in your beliefs. So if your business or organization would like to partner with us and help us build that culture and community, visit lovelocalpa.com/partner and fill out our free partnership form today.
Welcome back to Mission and Likeness. We are really excited for our guest here. Sherrie Clark from Storehouse Media Group is joining me. Sherrie, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Scott. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So, okay, print and storytelling is something that I absolutely love. I love just getting into a good book, a good story. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of times for a lot of believers, we're stuck having to resort to fantasy and fairy tales and made up stories that you know, sometimes we have to compromise some of our beliefs, but that's something that you're trying to fight against. How are you doing that?
Well, yeah, I'm a huge proponent of storytelling because I believe that storytelling is probably one of the most powerful ways to communicate. It is something that will resonate with people. It is going to be something that people remember. If I sit here and just throw a bunch of facts and statistics to you, it will stay with you a little bit, but you're going to forget some of the stuff, maybe even by the time you leave the room. But the story is going to apply to whatever you're thinking, whatever you're wanting, whatever you're trying to work out. You're going to walk away and like, oh, wow, yeah, you know, I never looked at it that way. So it's exceptionally powerful. And I do talk about storytelling because of its power. It's so fantastic. So, you know, I think nowadays, you know, putting it in the culture nowadays, it's sometimes, not sometimes, a lot, it gets perverted. Mm-hmm. And if we can, you know, take the story, and we do not have to do perversion. I think a story is, we don't need all the, like the swear words or the cuss words in there. We don't need the graphics, some of the graphics. Yeah. You know, back in the 50s, you know, they didn't have that. They had, you know, it left a lot to the imagination. And the human mind has a really powerful imagination.
It does.
You don't need to put it in people's face. And it doesn't make a story. You know, you can still give a good story without, you know, putting that stuff in there. Yeah, I was talking earlier to somebody about C.S. Lewis. And, you know, he's so he's such an amazing writer, and how he really started his quest on showing that God doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And it just showed just the opposite, that God does exist. And he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And he told a story that was just amazing, that stuck with people and got people hungry for more. So, storytelling can be really, really powerful, and it doesn't need a lot of elements that the world is trying to stick in there today.
So one of the things that you talked on that I completely agree with, the art of storytelling has in a way been lost. In marketing and in modern, get your attention kind of media that we live in now, people resort straight to sex sells and profanity entertains.
Yes.
That isn't always, I mean, to a cultural side of things, sure, that is a way to do it, but it's not the only way. I firmly don't believe that that's the only way to hold people's attention, by having profanity and sex in all of our media. And so how do you really define what a good story is versus what maybe our sinful nature wants us to crave?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest, most prominent storytellers is Jesus himself.
Mm-hmm.
He gave parable after parable because he knew people would relate to that. They would resonate with the story. They would be able to envision themselves in that situation he was talking about. And so he gave a good example, and it did not give any leeway to any of this cussing and sex and all that. To me, a good story, if you look at a fiction book and what's involved in a fiction book, it is you want a plot, you want a story. The plot moves it, the story's the emotional side, but characters, people get hooked on the characters. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, and I say this to people, I'm like, sometimes the characters are so strong that the story doesn't even matter that much. People are going to follow that character wherever it goes. And so when I work with people on writing books, we try to work on those characters, and we try to develop those characters, because if the reader can hook up with those characters, the characters they resonate with them, they're able to bond with them. Once those readers get hooked on the characters, then they'll follow them anywhere. Those characters drive the story. I look at, a series, NCIS, is a really good example. Like the older times when you had Mark Harmon, every character had idiosyncrasies. But it was, it was a clean show. It didn't have, the crazy stuff that's in there now. So you want to, you want to do pacing. You want to do, you've got to have conflict. Every story has to have conflict. If it doesn't have conflict, people aren't interested.
Right.
But you can do all of that, and you can create a wonderful story without adding components in there that really weren't even part of the story making process from the beginning. That's just been put in. Really, I would say in the last few decades, did it start getting more audacious and crossing lines and not even pushing the envelope, but really just diving through the envelope.
Yeah. Now, in the creative, in the Christian realm, I guess we'll say, creatives kind of have their limits. Okay, so how do we as creators, or I guess, where is the line for creators when we have the desire to entertain and we want to tell a good story? Where's the line between our liberty, where we're able to develop and move a story in a certain direction without crossing the line of subtracting or adding to who God is and what God sees as good, and just keeping everything in line there? How do we draw that line?
There are some things you do want to add in for authenticity, but I think when you draw the line where you can actually, if you have a question about it in your head, like, is this like crossing the line? Where do I draw the line? I would say, what happens? What does your gut tell you? What does your spirit tell you? If you feel it's wrong, then that's probably a good indicator, because we do have that conscience in us that draws the line on that. If you still are having a problem, then go to other people, ask them, go to people who are Christians, people who will give you honest feedback, like, hey, I want to put this in there. What say you? Do you think this is okay? Do you think this draws the line? So I think, where does your spirit stop at? And then where does people that you trust? It's always good to get good counsel. Also, if you're writing a book, if you're writing an article, a blog, maybe get some feedback from others. Again, people you trust, if you feel like you're getting too close to that line. Again, authenticity is good, but at what point do you have to, stop to make that all authentic? And you can stop before you actually cross over the line. So other people is always, a really good, thermometer on where this goes.
Yeah, you were talking about how people can kind of develop their own truth. And so as believers, we know what the truth is. We have God's word in order to, compare what we are portraying as truth or want to develop as truth, and to see if that goes against his word. And I love your advice on if you're feeling a little back and forth on it, seek out counsel from fellow believers, because I know for me in the creative process, I'll sometimes begin to justify something that may not be right. And I'll say, right, but it really helps the story. But if it's taking away from who God is and what he has done, then that's actually not the way we want to go. And so I love that advice from you. What do you think is one of the reasons why we become tempted to want to go away from the truth, maybe in an effort to justify, well, it's going to help out the story? What's the lure there?
I think sometimes you can get bad advice. And people like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. And we have a tendency to do that. And also, we sometimes think we may be more successful. The project may be more successful if we go ahead and do this and add this in there. And, or we take on this project because, maybe it's more money, or maybe we'll get more attention or more likes on social media. So I think, looking at what's it going to bring us temporarily as opposed to the long term. I have this thing that I always go to God before I take on a project, because I need to know what he says. I say, he's my CEO. He determines what we do and what we don't do. And there are projects that come to me. And although, working with that person be kind of cool and stuff like that, I know in my gut, I can't do that, because one day I will stand before God and I will account for every book I've worked on. Mm-hmm. And that's my dividing line right there is, when I stand before God, I have to account for what I've done. And I don't want him to say, that would have been a good story, but you had to add that in there. That didn't represent me. What would Jesus say? And I know that's an old cliche, that people used to wear those bracelets. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus say? But it really is a light. It is a guiding light as to what you should and shouldn't do. So you have to have that word in your heart. You have to have that, that fear of the Lord that says, you can't do this. This is getting pushing it a little bit too far. So at that point, you just got to pull away and know that, if you do the right thing, it may feel like it hurts at the time, but I'm going to tell you, God always makes up for it. God will honor those decisions to do what's right. And my mama used to say, just think of it as like an angel's right there looking over your shoulder. Angels right there hearing everything you say. They're reading everything that you write. That's what would Jesus say? What would Jesus do? And I don't want to make this all spiritual because, writing isn't all spiritual because we are human beings and we have feelings, we have emotions that we write down. But I do think that we do as Christians, we are a part of this world, but we are separate.
Yes.
And we need to make that dividing line. And that's my opinion.
Now, some people will try to push back, and they'll say, well, I mean, if you can't get into some of those nitty gritty things, you won't be able to tell a good love story. You won't be able to tell a good drama or a good, thriller because you need to incorporate those things. And I don't buy it. I think if we are developing our writing and our imaginative, abilities, I think we can tell tremendous love stories. I think we can go into some of those topics. Some topics that Christians will say are taboo are, the marriage relationship, or whether it comes to substance abuse or addictions. Some people say, oh, you can't go there, or you can't tell a good story from a Christian perspective on those topics because, oh, you just over spiritualize it. And
yes,
granted, some do, and I'm not saying that, but I think, like you said earlier, God is the number one storyteller. And he wouldn't have given us these abilities to tell stories if we couldn't do them the right way. And so what is your advice specifically for a writer who, is saying, hey, I want to tell a love story or a romantic comedy? Because I think those still fall within, those can be Christian based. How do you kind of guide them in working in those kinds of themes, but staying biblical?
Yeah, just to put things in context, I work on a lot of Christian books, but I also work on a lot of books that are not Christian. They don't come across as, oh, here's another Christian book. A lot of these books are stories and memoirs or biographies of some, people who've lived wonderful journeys, and they have Christian themes all through it. Like, you cannot deny that God wasn't present in their lives, but not once did they have to get, dirty. They didn't have to, sit there and use foul language or sex. You go back to the 50s, you go back to the 60s, the 40s, that kind of entertainment, they didn't have it. I remember when, Gone with the Wind, when Rex Butler made the, frankly, my dear, and he said that word, that was huge. Like, oh my goodness. But back in the day, people loved those shows, and people still do today.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're clean, and they do not have to depict, a sex scene or a, somebody, just, going off with foul language, but yet they're classics without having that. And I think through the years, this has been a desensitizing. The more we watch, the more we put into our eyes, again, it's the gateway to our soul, the more we become desensitized to it. And things that we wouldn't have even thought about years ago, the younger generations, it's just part of life. I have kids. I have kids in Generation X and no, Generation Z. I'm sorry, not that old. But I have kids in Generation Z, and I have also millennials. And they're used to what they see, and they don't think anything is wrong with it. But even, if you get to the Marvel comics, like that's a big deal too. And I'm not a big Marvel comic fan, but I do watch Spider-Man, and I have watched Spider-Man. And, he was pretty clean cut. And getting to the storytelling, people do enjoy those shows, and it doesn't go off the, chain with nasty stuff. So there are still some shows out there that are still wholesome, if you want to say that. I don't know if that's a good word to use, but
I'm here talking with Sherrie Clark of Storehouse Media Group, and Storehouse Media Group is our sponsor for today's show. So if you want to let your voice be heard, and if you desire to develop a story or write a book or publish a book and market a book, you need to check out Storehouse Media Group. StorehouseMediaGroup.com is their website. And Sherrie was gracious enough to offer a freebie to you, our listener, just for listening in to our conversation today. And it's an article called "How Great Leaders Write Their Story in a Book and Leave a Legacy." And this is free to you. So you can just go to Write Book, that's WRITE, book.sherrieclark.com. There's a free download link there that you can get this free resource that she is offering. So I just want to thank Sherrie again for that. And that's StorehouseMediaGroup.com. They are our on-air sponsor, so we want to thank them. And head over to writebook.sherrieclark.com for how great leaders write their story in a book and leave a legacy. So Sherrie, I want to take the next few minutes as we close out and talk about a couple of specific projects that you're working on, and just some of the things that you're seeing happening within this world. But before we do that, one question that I wanted to ask you is, what have you seen as the biggest obstacle for writers who are looking to maybe get into writing a book? Maybe they like writing some blog posts, but they've never really thought about or considered actually pursuing writing. What are the big obstacles you see for them?
I'll go back to what I hear and even how I felt. When I first wrote my first article that was published in a newsletter and it got published, I felt like a deer caught in headlights. It's like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to read. What if it's bad? What if it's wrong? So I think there's a lot of fear that's involved, in writing and getting information out there and content out there. But it happens all the time, especially on social media. Social media is huge about writing, and there are a lot of writers out there in your audience who want to write a book, who want to write the written word, because the written word is huge when it comes to spreading the gospel and when it comes to teaching. I mean, it's all through the Bible. I took some scriptures, Jeremiah 30, Verse 2 says, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, write in a book all the words that I have spoken to you." I mean, God wants us to write. And if you're a writer, if you just journal, if you jot things, maybe you like write music, maybe you want to write a book, don't be afraid, because that's a gifting that God's given you. And we want to take advantage of those giftings. And if you want to write an article or blogs, just get on there and kick it. I mean, don't worry about what people are doing. Maybe you can start small if it makes you feel better. If you want to write a book and you don't know how to get started, just contact us. We can help you in that area, because that's one thing a lot of people will not start. They just don't know how to get started. Or maybe they started and wrote the whole story and it's 3 pages. And that's I don't know what to do to create a book out of it. So there are ways to do it, but if that gifting that God's given you, he will develop it just like he does any other gifting. If you're a singer, if you're an artist, if you're a baseball player, he will help strengthen it. And he'll send people in your path to help you as well.
Yeah, he's always faithful to provide. And as you were talking about that, the movie Sister Act came into my mind, and I just remember the Whoopi Goldberg character saying to Lauryn Hill, she says, "If you wake up every morning and you think about singing, you're a singer." And so Is that kind of how you would define what a writer is? Someone who is always looking, maybe they're just writing short stories, or maybe they're just writing short little posts, or they're just journaling. How do you define what a writer is?
I say if you are someone who loves to journal, if you're someone who puts down your thoughts, and you do it in writing, you're a writer. You're a blooming, blossoming writer. Don't discount any of that and start journaling. Put your thoughts and your feelings of what happens. My first published book, Small Voices Silence, a lot of that was based off my journal. I have been journaling the whole time. It's a book about the foster care system, and I was a foster parent, and I journaled through it all because that's what they would say. You have to journal everything. Well, when it came time to write the book, that was my basis of everything that I was doing. So journaling is a sign of writing. Writing articles, you may be a content writer where you write articles and you show and you teach in that way. That's a way to do it. Writing blogs, there's different kinds of writers, but you can also overlap. There's copywriters, and they're more marketing, probably more what you do. There's Scott. There's content writers, and those are the people who do the case studies and the articles. And then you have books. They're all different in a way, but in the way they're built and the elements that they have involved. It doesn't matter, whatever God has you assigned to. And sometimes I started off as a copywriter and a content writer, and then I started getting this hunger. I wanted to write the next great American novel. And so that's what I started doing. I studied everything. So if you're a writer and you've got a hunger to do that, start studying writing. If you find yourself loving to do articles, start studying it. I read just about every book I could get on writing, on editing books, on publishing books. So I learned everything about them so I could write my book. But here's the thing. I started my book. And then what ended up happening is the Lord told me to write another book. Mm. And so that's what I did. And I wrote that book. Still didn't quite know what I was doing, even though I'd read all these books. But then when I gave it to an editor and she did a developmental edit, that's when I learned how to breathe life into it. Mm. And so I still write content at times. I still write copy. I have to write copy for my own business. So that was a good background. That was a good training ground for me. But once you get into books, it just kind of took off. Again, I still do those other writings from time to time. So if you're right there, you may be an author one day. And then I tell people, I'm like, oh, the book bug got you, because people will write a book and then they come back and they want to write another one. They want to write another one. And I was like, well, the book bug bit you. Mm. And that's what they'll do. They'll just do multiple books. And sometimes not even planning on doing that, but they just realized they had that in them to do it.
Now, you recently just got back from a trip about a new project that you're going to be working on. Tell us a little bit about what you have planned and what the story is.
Oh, yes. This has actually been something that I actually started contemplating and working on in 2017. Mm. And it involves the Native Americans, because I have Native American blood, and it came to me about the Trail of Tears. And I don't know if your audience has heard about the Trail of Tears, but it was basically when there were five tribes that were forced out of their homeland and forced across the country to settle, like the Cherokees were forced to settle in Oklahoma. So I wanted to tell this true story. I wanted to show the truth. One thing as a writer I would highly suggest is researching your work, because let's say you're writing a book about flights or airplanes. Some pilots may really want to pick it up, but if you don't have your facts correct, then you lose credibility. So you want to keep your credibility as a writer. So make sure that you research everything that you put in that book. And so this is going to be a book. It's going to cover several generations. It's going to be a saga of the Native Americans, and primarily the Cherokee, through the Trail of Tears and onward into the present, and what the the saga is intended to do is because there is so much that went on. We want to take that trail of tears and we want to do a reversal to where it becomes a trail of joy. We want to bring that restoration back to the Native Americans. And so we're really excited about that. It's going to probably take, a few years to get it done. And we're super excited about getting started on it. So Oregon was a wonderful trip. It's part of a tour. It's called the Trail of Tears Tour. I think you can go trailoftearstour.org. Okay. And they're talking about they're going to be, doing the trail as well. And they talk about the Trail of Joy as well. So it's a big deal to me and to my partner in this, and we're really excited about it all.
Well, I would definitely recommend, if you're not plugged into what Storehouse Media and what Sherrie is doing, definitely we will put links on the YouTube video for you to go and check that out. We'll put some links in the show notes as well. Sherrie, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really do appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for having me. It's been fun and sharing me with your audience.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to get an update on what you were doing and have you back on the show here in the near future, because I'm just really excited about what you're doing. That's all the time we have for this episode. I just want to thank Sherrie again. Head over to storehousemediagroup.com, or you can just go to get that free resource, writebook.sherrieclark.com. You can follow us here on Mission and Likeness on YouTube, on Rumble, and you can follow Love Local on all of the major platforms as well. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Mission and Likeness.